Merkley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary. We've just witnessed a three-day bro fest with Putin and Xi celebrating authoritarian power. China certainly running over the top of Hong Kong, and of course we're very concerned about its threat to Taiwan. Russia assaulting Ukraine and trying to take it in just a brutal display of force. How much should the American public be concerned about the way these authoritarian leaders are approaching the world?
Well, on one level, this is no surprise. Both countries have very different worldviews than our own. They may find common cause in opposing the worldview that we and so many other countries around the world seek to defend and advance. Before the Russian aggression against Ukraine, you'll remember that President Xi and President Putin had a meeting in which they declared a partnership with no limits or a limitless friendship, depending on how you translate it. And to some extent, we continue to see that play out. I think in many ways with Russia now as the very junior partner in this relationship, but a partner that may serve some interests that China has. But what we've done at the same time is to make a major reinvestment, rejuvenation, re-energizing of our own alliances and partnerships. And we now have much greater convergence than we had a couple of years ago on how to approach both of these challenges. You see that in the coalition that's come together to oppose the Russian aggression against Ukraine, both in terms of the support for Ukraine and the pressure being exerted against Russia. You see that in the work that countries are doing together to deal with some of the challenges that China poses. We have with European partners, Asian partners, much greater convergence on everything from investment screening mechanisms to export controls to outward investment.
Thank you, and I'm quite impressed by the way we've responded. But I do think that the circumstances regarding Hong Kong, Ukraine, and China's use of high tech to suppress the Uyghurs are very appealing strategies to many authoritarian leaders. And we have decades ahead in which we're going to be struggling for the vision of democracy and human rights versus the authoritarian power. One of the things that both Russia and China have been engaged in is transnational repression. And last week I introduced a bill with Senators Rubio, Cardin, and Haggerty, a comprehensive bill. You may not have had a chance to look it over yet, but certainly it's trying to lay out a roadmap for us to respond to transnational repression. And I just want to keep raising this as a growing threat to citizens inside our own country, and also the concern about how they are working to extradite people back to China or Russia with grave consequences.
Yeah, we very much share that concern and really welcome working with you, the other members, on that legislation.
I will be leading a congressional delegation to Vietnam and Indonesia here shortly at the beginning of April, and we'll be going to Jakarta to have conversations with ASEAN, given that that's where their capital is right now. And how do you evaluate how successful ASEAN will be in being a significant part of the structure that kind of resists Chinese expansionist power?
I think we're seeing increased concern among a number of countries in ASEAN for some of the exertions of power and influence that China is displaying, particularly, for example, when it comes to the maritime claims that they're making that are in contradiction with international law. Some of the actions that the Chinese vessels of one kind or another are taking, and we see this play out on a regular basis. So we're very much engaged, for example, with the ASEAN countries as well as with other countries in helping to build up what's called maritime domain awareness, helping to give them the tools to have much greater visibility on what's going on in their own seas, to be able to see in real time any kind of aggressive actions being taken, to be able to see in real time the illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing that is devastating livelihoods in many of these countries where China is one of the principal actors. So I think you're seeing a real significant awareness of some of these challenges. and we're taking practical steps to try to help countries address it.
Thank you. I'm going to shift to Central America. A few years ago, I went down with Tom Carper to assess the challenges, and we found the 3 C's, if you will. We found the cartels, we found the corruption, and we found climate change, all driving really a disintegration of the economy and livability, which were driving factors of folks deciding to take the risky journey north. We have a new opportunity with the new president, well, not so new now, but of Honduras, President Castro. How's that going?
We've been engaged with President Castro under administration. I think, by the way, as you know, the former president of Honduras is awaiting trial in the United States for corruption, among other things. We're working to engage these governments, whether it's Honduras, whether it's Guatemala, whether it's El Salvador. There are challenges posed by some of the policies that the governments are pursuing, but we're working to find ways to engage with them on issues of clearly mutual concern to us. So we're working on that on a regular basis.
Well, it's always helpful to have a new opportunity, but it's very difficult for a president alone to change policy when things are deeply embedded and the cartels are very embedded and corruption is very much there, and climate change is not going away. So a lot to overcome. Going across to Burma, I led a congressional delegation years ago when Aung San Suu Kyi invited us to come and see that there was nothing to hide. And then at the last moment, she and her team blocked our ability to see the some 300 villages that had been burned and razed. And then since then, we've had the military take over, and things have been perhaps even worse. And we always hope that there is some kind of path back to democracy, back to some form of human rights, but it's not looking too good. Any ways you can make me feel better about this?
I wish that I could, but unfortunately I share your assessment. We have been working since the military takeover to do a number of things, including, of course, first and foremost, stopping the violence, which continues to take place every single day, and that's gotten worse, to release prisoners, and to get back on the path of democracy. None of that has happened. We've been working with many other countries to try to exert pressure on the military regime. We have by the way, we have the Burma Act as well, whose passage we appreciate and welcome. We're working to implement it. Part of that goes to the support that we're providing to democratic groups in Burma, as well as ethnic groups that are dealing with the repression coming from the military junta, trying to prepare them effectively for governance. And at the same time, we continue to ramp up economic actions against the regime. We've designated, I think to date, about 80 individuals, some 30 or 40 entities, military leaders, business affiliates, arms dealers, energy companies that are supporting the regime in an effort to exert some meaningful pressure to move them back to the democratic path. You were talking about ASEAN a minute ago. Of course, we've been strongly encouraging the ASEAN 5-point consensus for them to actually implement it in a meaningful way. That's been very challenging. In short, I wish that I had something positive or hopeful to say. In this moment, it's an incredibly challenged situation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Paul.